Ever catch yourself totally glued to an automotive review, even if you aren't actively looking to buy a car? Well, we got our hands on a really fascinating document today that explains exactly why that happens. We are looking at a highly specific creative brief. It's basically a blueprint designed to generate the ultimate, hyper-engaging, emotional automotive script. This isn't just some list of car facts. It's a literal masterclass in digital storytelling and audience psychology. We're going to deconstruct this whole blueprint and see exactly how it builds a captivating narrative from the ground up.
Before we map out the nitty-gritty car details this brief demands, we gotta understand the psychological architecture behind it. The source material doesn't just want a boring rundown of features. No way. It absolutely insists on being optimized for maximum audience retention. That means every single sentence has to be engineered to stop you from clicking away. It asks a pretty huge question, right there on the screen. What is the secret formula for ultimate audience retention? And the answer, according to our source, relies entirely on a very deliberate sequence of psychological triggers.
And this brilliantly shows exactly where that retention strategy kicks off. The source explicitly mandates skipping any sort of standard, slow introduction. No slow buildups allowed here. Instead, it demands a powerful 15-second hook. Just look at the specific words in this quote: curiosity, urgency, and suspense. The goal? To instantly create this feeling of absolute necessity in the viewer's mind, like they literally must watch until the very end.
So how do you keep that urgency going after those first 15 seconds? Well, the brief requires strategically using specific psychological triggers. Notice how it explicitly calls out FOMO, the fear of missing out. Alongside curiosity, surprise, and social proof, FOMO is basically weaponized here to make sure the viewer is deeply emotionally invested before a single car specification is even mentioned. The blueprint knows that we humans are hardwired to pay attention when we think we might miss out on something crucial or, a shared cultural experience.
Now that we're properly hooked, let's take a quick glance at our agenda to see how the source material structures the rest of this perfect presentation. We're going to hit storytelling versus bullet points, integrating specs and data, analyzing the competition, and finally, emotion, costs, and mistakes.
All right, moving right along to our first major requirement, which tackles exactly how information should be delivered to the audience.
So, the specific subject of this blueprint is the Ford Mustang. But get this, the brief strictly forbids using basic, dry bullet points to explain the Mustang's history. You can't just rattle off the production year and unit sales like some boring high school history textbook. Nope. Instead, it mandates a smooth, flowing storytelling style to explain not just what happened, but exactly why this car became a true American icon. It's all about crafting a journey, not just presenting a timeline.
Building on that history, what's really interesting here is that the source requires the script to explain why millions of Americans still love the Mustang today. This is crucial. The technical review has to be wrapped in this much larger cultural narrative. It connects the cold, hard machine to actual people. By focusing on that enduring love, the explainer taps perfectly into that social proof trigger we talked about a minute ago. I mean, if millions of people love it, you subconsciously feel compelled to figure out why, right?
And how exactly do you keep them engaged through all that storytelling? I absolutely love this direct command from the brief: build suspense several times by teasing an important fact that will be revealed later. It's the classic open loop technique. You basically promise the viewer a huge payoff, maybe a hidden feature, a shocking price tag, or a critical flaw, but you make them wait for it. It's a brilliant, mandatory retention strategy woven right into the DNA of the script. Okay, let's jump into our next section and see exactly how this blueprint handles the actual technical foundation of the Mustang without totally losing the audience to boredom. Just look at the sheer volume of hard data the brief demands here. Under performance, it wants all available engine options, horsepower, torque, transmission types, 0 to 60 times, top speed, and fuel economy. Then, under technology and design, it demands a deep dive into the exterior and interior, digital displays, the whole infotainment system, safety features, and all the different driving modes. I mean, that is a massive, massive amount of technical data. And remember, all of this has to be smoothly integrated into the story without feeling like you're just reading off a spreadsheet.
So, to prevent that giant wall of data from becoming a total snooze fest, the blueprint actually requires injecting specific engagement boosters. It asks for the latest upgrades in the newest model, sure, but more importantly, it demands that the explainer detail exactly why these features actually matter to the driver. On top of that, the data has to be broken up with interesting facts, little-known details, and surprising statistics. This makes sure the viewer is constantly hit with that surprise psychological trigger, keeping their brain actively engaged with all those technical specs.
Moving on to analyzing the competition. Because let's be real, a perfect explainer doesn't just exist in a vacuum, right? It absolutely requires real-world context to be valuable.
The prompt actually dictates a direct head-to-head comparison against 5 specific heavy hitters. Stepping into the ring for American muscle dominance, we have the Chevrolet Camaro and the Dodge Challenger. And coming in from overseas, the Toyota Supra, Nissan Z, and BMW M4. By forcing the script to evaluate the Mustang against these specific heavyweights, it heavily leverages the psychological trigger of comparison. People love a good battle, for sure, and establishing the car's place in the broader market creates some really high-stakes context.
But here is where the blueprint gets incredibly smart. It includes what we can essentially call the honesty clause. The instructions explicitly state you must explain the biggest advantages and disadvantages honestly. You literally cannot just praise the car for 10 minutes straight. A totally one-sided review just feels like a cheap advertisement, and viewers will check out instantly. By objectively covering the drawbacks, the script builds massive trust and credibility with the audience.
Finally, we hit our last section, transitioning from the fun dream of the car's performance to the harsh reality of the driveway and the wallet.
The script has to systematically ground the viewer back in reality. First, it requires detailing the latest pricing and trim levels, specifically guiding the viewer on who should actually buy which trim. Second, it demands a full breakdown of the hidden financial realities. We're talking maintenance costs, reliability, resale value, and insurance premiums. And third, it asks for a description of the real, day-to-day ownership experience in the United States. The step-by-step breakdown ensures the viewer walks away with highly practical, actionable advice. And right as we're talking about money, the blueprint drops in the warning. The script must mention common mistakes buyers make before purchasing a Mustang and exactly how to avoid them. Highlighting these costly, common buyer mistakes is a perfect use of that FOMO trigger we defined earlier. The viewer stays absolutely glued to the screen because, frankly, they are terrified of making a super expensive error that countless other people have already made. Ultimately, the blueprint brings the whole thing full circle with this final requirement. Include emotional storytelling that makes viewers imagine owning and driving the car. It demands that all those horsepower stats, all the infotainment specs, and even the insurance costs ultimately serve an emotional climax. Because think about it, the data only matters if the viewer can physically picture themselves behind the wheel, right? Feeling that acceleration, experiencing the thrill of the drive. The logic justifies the purchase, but the emotion makes the sale and keeps the viewer watching. So we've just mapped out the entire anatomy of a perfect engagement script. From that intense 15-second hook and the strategic deployment of FOMO to the smooth integration of dense specs and honest competitive analysis, all leading up to an emotional climax. It's a truly fascinating look at the hidden mechanics of digital storytelling. And it really leaves you wondering just how many of the articles and reviews we consume every single day are built on this exact same invisible framework. Knowing this blueprint, how is it going to change the way you consume or maybe even create information from now on?